Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 13-game Major League Baseball slate that starts at 7 o'clock tonight. It is a big old slate. Before I get started, could you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Also share the video if you don't mind. And make sure to check out Discord in the link in the description below. Um, Before I get started too, can you guys drop a home run call in the comments below, and I'll shoot you out tomorrow if you have that. With that said, let's get into our core plays here. We have Corbin Burnes from Milwaukee, William Contreras from Milwaukee, and Tommy Edman from St. Louis. Over here on FanDuel, we have Corbin Burnes, Tommy Edman, and Trey Turner. Philadelphia is in an interesting position since they are in Colorado, but do be careful not to be super overweight on them on this slate, especially in GPPs, simply because that game, just because they're in Colorado doesn't automatically mean you're going to get a lot of runs, but it definitely has the potential to. Moving on, let's go ahead and get into our top plays here on DraftKings. So we'll start with our pitchers, and we will start with Corbin Burnes, who's actually one of the cheaper options when it comes to P1 choices today. He's actually in the best position since he's got the best matchup against Kansas City. He is in play due to that being a lot less expensive and being in a pretty decent matchup. He's also has the potential for a good K rate, despite the fact he hasn't had a great one so far this season. I do expect him to have a good upside game here, and he's got nice metrics for this situation. Again, he has to get the K rate up a little bit. Sonny Gray for the Minnesota Twins is also interesting today. He does have good stuff, but he's got a toughish matchup. The K rate makes him worth the look here. He's not ideal with the price, but he is definitely in play as a P1 option. And then we get to our top two guys, Garrett Cole, who has been absolutely lights out for most of the season so far, though he has got a tough matchup here against Tampa Bay, and he gave up 5 earned runs last time he played them, which was the last time he started. His price is super expensive, makes him pretty hard to roster. He is definitely a very contrarian GPP play as a P1 option, but he's high risk, high reward potentially in this situation. And then we have Spencer Strider. He's in a very similar situation against a very tough team in Toronto. He's got the best K rate on the slate by a wide margin, and he has giant potential, but he is a little bit risky from the pricing perspective because he's so expensive. So he is in play, but he is high risk, high reward, mainly a GPP play, I think. But you could probably mix him in as a cash game option. Just seems super risky. Then we'll look at Gore for Washington, who's a little bit cheaper. Now, his matchup isn't ideal against the Mets, and I do not hate the Mets necessarily today, but he's got a good K rate, and that gives him some upside in this matchup. A little bit risky, but has some potential. Then we'll look at Dustin May as another second P2 option, who has a pretty good matchup here. He's faced him recently in 27 fantasy points. He's been pretty good this season. His K rate's a little risky, though, but he definitely has some upside in this matchup. And then Martin Perez for Texas. He's also in play today. He's got a decent matchup here. The K rate has been a little bit shaky, but the matchup is nice against Oakland, and so he's worth taking a look from a GPP perspective as a P2 option. Moving into our catchers and first baseman. Now, there's a lot of catchers available today that look good, but William Contreras definitely jumps off the page to me as a great option here. He's got home run potential. He's hitting the ball pretty well as of late, too, and he's had 2 home runs in the last 3 games. I like his upside, and he's one of the better options on Milwaukee as a whole. Adley Rutschman is also in play for Baltimore. He's pretty expensive, though. Makes him a little bit hard to roster, but he's hitting the ball just about as well as Contreras is, and he definitely has as much upside. Wilson Contreras for St. Louis is also in play against Boston. They're facing Paxton, who hasn't pitched in a couple of years in Major League Baseball, and he didn't do well against in the minors either. So I expect St. Louis to come out swinging, trying to get some runs on him early, and Contreras is definitely a way you could utilize, get some opportunity there. And then for a value play, Francisco Alvarez, if he draws a start, he has some boomer bust potential here for the Mets in this matchup against Gore. Moving into first base, Paul Goldschmidt is obviously in play here against a questionable pitching position situation, and so I like his upside. He has kind of a good batting average, but he is very expensive, and that does make him a little bit harder to roster, but he's definitely in play here. Matt Olson is also in play as a contrarian option to him. He's got big home run potential. He's been hitting the ball extremely well lately. Despite the batting average not being ideal, he's had a lot of hits in the last few games, so I like his upside, especially with the home run potential. Alec Boom is also in play for Philly. If you want to stack Philly, which is definitely doable today, he's definitely somebody to consider in that stack because he's cheap enough and has some nice upside. And then Lamont Wade Jr. for the San Francisco Giants. He's been really good lately. He's got good home run potential here in this matchup, and San Francisco looks like a decent team to score some runs today. Then we'll look into the second baseman, and we'll look at Valdez for Boston. He's very cheap, and that helps you pay up for some other options. He started pretty solidly here. He's got good metrics, has stolen base potential. If he draws a start, that's very important in this case. He'll have some upside in this situation. Then we'll look at Tommy Edman, who I really like a lot today. And he is what I consider a core play. And he can play second or shortstop. He has some nice utility for this situation. Now, he hasn't hit the ball particularly great the last few games, but he has home run potential here, and he looks like a really solid option against a weak opponent. Andre Jimenez for Cleveland is also in play. A little bit riskier, but he has some potential here. He's not really a big home run hitter, but he has the potential from a batting perspective to have a decent matchup. To get a couple of hits in a decent matchup, that's what I'm trying to say. Josh Jung is a great option at third base. I thought about making him a core play, but the only real risk here is that he's been a little bit suspect the last few games, but he still has some good upside here. I like his matchup, and he's got great metrics for this one. Rafael Devers is also in play for Boston. He has a big boom potential option here. He hasn't hit a home run in the last few games, but he definitely has the potential to have a really solid upside game. I like the matchup. I like his price, even though it's fairly expensive. Nolan Arenado is a little bit overpriced here on DraftKings simply because he hasn't hit the ball well this season, but he is finally starting to hit the ball decently, and he's got a good matchup here, and so he definitely draws him in consideration. He's a much better play on FanDuel where he's a lot more reduced price. J.D. Davis for San Francisco is also in play, hitting the ball extremely well for San Francisco. He also has home run potential and a nice matchup here. So moving into the shortstop, we'll look at Trey Turner, who's uber expensive here on DraftKings. A lot more rosterable on FanDuel, but he has a nice matchup here. And, if you think the Phillies are worth a stack, he's definitely a top option on that stack. Carlos Correa for Minnesota has hit the ball really just lackluster so far this season. And he has even claimed himself that he admits that he's not playing well. But he's had 2 straight games with a decent amount of fantasy points, and he hit a home run a few games ago. I think he's got some upside as he might be starting to see the ball better, and if that's the case, then he's definitely worth a look. Kyle Farmer for Minnesota is also a kind of contrarian play today, a very cheap option, kind of a Hail Mary-like play. He's hit the ball decent so far, and he's got home run potential in this matchup. And then Ahmad Rosario for Cleveland, he is also in play today. He has had some really good upside in certain matchups and stuff, and Cleveland does have some interesting utility here in this particular situation. Moving into the outfielders, we'll start with Aaron Judge for Yankees. He has some big-time upside here. He's got a great matchup. He's been a little bit inconsistent, but he definitely has the home run potential, and it's been a few games since he's hit a home run. Been a while, actually, since the 19th of last month, so he's due, and I really like the potential here for that to be what happens today. Corbin Carroll is also in play for Arizona. He has some really nice upside in this matchup. He's been a little bit of a hiccupy guy the last few games, but I like his upside, and if he draws a start, which I think he took yesterday off, so if he draws a start today, he's definitely in play. Alvarez for Houston is in play here in a good matchup for him. He's hitting the ball really well. He's got solid metrics for this matchup and definitely has some upside. JD Martinez. He's a little bit less expensive here than he has been. But he definitely is a little bit riskier, but he's kind of a secondary top tier option with home run potential. Excuse me. Then we'll get into our value plays and look at Joey Wimmer for Milwaukee. Now he hasn't hit the ball very well, but he hasn't. He does have big boom potential. He's had some home runs so far this season. He's actually got a good matchup here. I don't think the metrics jump off the charts for him, so he's definitely in play. It's kind of a Hail Mary option. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. for Arizona looks like a very good option today. Hitting the ball solidly, has a nice matchup here against Berea, and has some good potential. Michael Harris, I really like him a lot today. He's still just too cheap. I know his batting average isn't great, but when he has potential every time out to get hits, home runs, and also get stolen bases, and that gives him a lot of upside. And I don't think his price will stay this low for very long. Newt Bar for St. Louis is also in play. He has some big time upside here. Has had some really good games lately. Has hit the ball well. Has stolen bases. Kind of similar to Harris in his upside here. Tommy Pham for the Mets is also in play for this matchup, despite being kind of a bad batting average guy. He has some nice kind of Hail Mary potential here. Dylan Carlson also has the Hail Mary potential for St. Louis in the plus matchup with high risk, high reward. And then finally, Robbie Grossman for Texas is in a similar situation as well. So then we'll look over here on FanDuel, and our FanDuel looks a little bit better because I think the pricing for pitchers is a little bit better than DraftKings. You can kind of mix and match which pitcher you want with your lineup, and I definitely advise making it, if you're playing GPPs, to definitely make a couple different lineups with each pitcher, whether it be Strider, Cole, Gray, Corbin Burns, and Martin Perez. Those are your top options today, and so I think it's probably good to separate them out. But with the way pricing is here, it's definitely they're definitely all usable, and so that definitely can help you, build a really good lineup that can potentially take down a GPP. William Contreras for Milwaukee is a great option at catcher or first base. Now, I don't always use catchers on FanDuel, but they look really solid today, so it's definitely worth a look. Goldschmidt is also in play here. He has some nice upside in this matchup. He's got big time potential. Hasn't hit the ball quite as well as we'd like, but he definitely has the utility. He definitely has the opportunity today. Adley Rutschman is also in play for Baltimore. A little bit. He's priced actually pretty fairly here, a little higher on DraftKings. He's got nice metrics for this one. Bryce Harper is also in play here, though he is very expensive and somewhat hard to roster as a result. He started the season really solidly. I like his upside in this matchup. And then Wilson Contreras for St. Louis also in play as a good option that's just pretty cheap and has some nice upside. Moving to second base, we'll look at Kyle Farmer, who is very cheap, and that gives him some advantage here. Despite he's not had a great season so far, he's only played a handful of games, but his batting average is okay, and he's got home run potential, and so I like the upside in this particular situation. Mookie Betts is also in play for the Dodgers. A little bit high risk, high reward today because of his batting average and stuff, but he's got home run potential. His price is actually pretty rosterable regardless of which pitcher you use. Then we'll look at Jimenez for Cleveland, and he also has some interesting upside, though he's very boomer bust today as a minimum price guy. I'm also going to mention that you could look at Marcus Semien as well, though he's extremely expensive. Moving into third base, we'll look at Josh Jung, who has some really good potential here. He's got boomer bust potential as well, but he is hitting the ball pretty average, but he definitely has big home run potential here. He's got the best ISO and WOBA, I think, on the slate for handiness today, so I really like his upside. But then we'll also look at Valdez for Boston, who I also really like today as a pretty cheap option here on FanDuel. Gives him some utility and nice metrics for the situation. Devers is also in play at this position if you can afford him, though he's very expensive and somewhat hard to roster as a result. And obviously he's been very boomer bust lately. Arenado is finally starting to hit the ball decent, and his price is still really cheap over here, which gives him some nice upside and a plus matchup. Then we'll look into the shortstops. We'll look at Trey Turner, who's $3,300, is pretty well available here. I think he's got really nice metrics if you want to utilize some Philadelphia players in the slate, especially with them playing in Colorado. Tommy Edman is also in play as a core play, I think, in a really nice plus matchup as well, and just a little bit underpriced here. Gunnar Henderson is a good contrarian option for Baltimore in a good matchup, though he hasn't hit the ball well. He does tend to have decent fantasy games when he does have a couple, few hits and good matchups. And this is definitely a situation like that. And then Ahmad Rosario is also in play here as a guy that's hit the ball decently average, but he has good stolen base potential and stuff like that. Moving into the outfielders, we'll start with Aaron Judge, who is actually underpriced here on FanDuel. I almost made him a core play because the price. He's still just extremely expensive, but he isn't nearly as expensive as a lot of the other guys. I mean, if you look at the outfielders, I think Acuna is $800 more expensive, so he's definitely in play. Juan Soto is also fairly priced here on $3,300. Now the matchup isn't quite as ideal, but he's hitting the ball pretty well lately, and I like his upside here. Alvarez for Houston is also in play. Really solid play lately. I like his upside, and he's hitting the ball extremely well. A Hail Mary play here is Joey Wamir for Milwaukee. Sorry if I'm butchering your name, though. He's got some interesting upside here as he's hitting the ball. Kind of a boomer bust. I mean, you look at the scores, he seems to not have any big games except for like 30s and 20s and 20s, and he had 112. But so he's a boomer bust play, but he's also minimum priced. JD Martinez is in play here on this site. He has some nice upside for this matchup. He's been a little bit shaky, but he has a good situation. Corbin Carroll is a guy I really like a lot today for Arizona. He has hit the ball really well this season. He's got home run potential, and he's one of the best young players in the game. Michael Harris, despite not hitting the ball great so far this season and had some injuries, he's still managing to put together some decent fantasy point games, and I like his upside here, and his price is nice and low, and it won't stay that way for long. Lars Nootbaar is very similarly valued here to me on this slate, like Harris. He has some nice upside here, though his price is a little bit more expensive. And then finally, last but not least, Byron Buxton is just a little bit too cheap. He has hit the ball better lately, though he has had some rough games the last 5 or 6. But he has some nice upside in this matchup. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.